Hello and warm welcome in to another episode. We're going to talk about boundaries, which is such a buzzword and honestly something that I just cannot keep out of my mouth when it comes to my content. And sometimes I think, oh, Johanna, people don't want to learn about boundaries. It's kind of like the broccoli, it's the vegetable you have to eat. But today I really wanted to break that belief in myself, and I brought myself to the remembering of why is this so foundational. It just has to be foundational. So, healthy boundaries are the difference between acting from fear, compromising our values, feeling insecure, ignoring our preferences, tolerating things that don't feel good in our body, harboring resentment, and having healthy boundaries. It means feeling clear with your energy, getting your needs met in a healthy way, feeling connected to your body, having the ability to stay in alignment, feeling safe in relationships, feeling able to create and deepen connections, and on a relational level, being able to attract men who show up really consistently, build dreams with a partner without losing your sense of self, and so many other things. So boundaries really are key. I don't know how to tell you. Maybe you're already convinced. You're like, Johanna, I already clicked the title. I already want to learn boundaries. Let's get into it. So I think that with all of the topic about boundaries and blah, 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 there's like so much you need to have healthy boundaries and not very much breaking it down into what that means and what it means in relationship to needs and when is it your responsibility and when is it someone else's. So it can feel kind of complex. But really, it just comes down to the fact that boundaries are like these invisible rules or lines that we create to protect our emotional space and our mental space and our physical space and our physical body. So imagine a boundary like a fence around your yard. And the fence says, this is my space, and I decide what feels comfortable here. So what would happen if there was no fence? This is when we talk about leaky or porous boundaries. No fence, what would happen? Well, maybe deer would come in and they would eat the garden, or you would actually feel kind of unsafe because anyone could kind of just stroll in through your yard at any time, which would feel unpredictable. People might throw garbage in your yard. Maybe someone drives their truck in your yard. Maybe someone even decides to park their vehicle in your yard because there's no fence, okay? And none of that feels good. It feels unsafe for the body, but it might also feel like, oh, I owe this to my neighbors and the deers need to eat too. And that's the people-pleasing tone coming in. So let's think of the opposite. What if the fence is too big? It's like 40 feet in the air. Maybe there's even a ceiling around this fence. It's a really intense fence. Then what happens? This is our rigid boundaries. Then you can't really see what's going on. The sunlight is blocked, which doesn't feel very good. Probably feel very disconnected from the world. So when we create healthy boundaries, we want a fence that is clear but permeable, likely a little bit permeable. Either it's just high enough where you feel safe, or it's more like a chain link fence where you can see what's going on, lots of sunlight's coming in, there's airflow, but it's clear where your boundaries are. So boundaries are knowing what feels good and what doesn't in terms of our interactions with others and also in terms of how we treat ourselves. So it's okay to tell people they're getting too close or they're asking too much or they're crossing a line that feels uncomfortable, right? These things are for your containment, your safety, and for you to thrive. Setting a boundary doesn't mean shutting people out. It means protecting yourself so that you can be your best self in life and relationships. And ultimately, good boundaries are going to make relationships stronger because they bring clarity, they show respect for the other and respect for yourself, and everyone feels good when they have that sort of knowing. So when it comes to uncovering, understanding, clarifying, loving your own boundaries, the question about needs is completely intertwined. And I also realized that the question about values is also intertwined. So we can think of needs as essential parts of our well-being. This is what we need to thrive, not just survive, which is food, shelter, water, that's survival. Our needs are what you need to thrive. So those are things like feeling healthy, feeling fulfilled, wanting respect, sleep, personal space, love. Needs are what really fills us up and keeps us balanced, and they come from within, right? This is about you. It doesn't matter what someone else needs. This is what you need. Boundaries, on the other hand, are the actions or the limits that we set up in order to protect those needs. It's the structure that we create so that those needs get met, which might be booking fitness classes or booking a massage. It's the external expression through words and actions of what we're comfortable with and what allows us to honor those needs. For example, if your need is personal time alone to recharge, then the boundary is going to be scheduling that in and communicating that with people if they ask you for something that would actually impose on that boundary and getting that need met. So let's say that you've decided that Tuesday nights are your self-care night and you're not doing any socializing, but then so-and-so wants you to come for dinner. That's when it's your responsibility to communicate the boundary of, I've made this a consistent agreement with myself, and as much as I'd like to come, I know that this is important to me, or I know that if I break it, then it's gonna be broken, And of course, you can also decide that week, is it realistic for you to move it to Monday or Wednesday, and is that going to be okay for you? But you get to decide. It's about you and your experience, and no story about what your friend is going to make it mean if they hear this no from you, right? It's like your responsibility to uphold this boundary. Values are reflecting what really matters to us on a deep level. So that can be honesty, health, respect, compassion, growth. They are the why behind our choices for our needs and our boundaries. So our needs definitely stem directly from our values. If you deeply value personal growth, for instance, then you might have this need for alone time to pursue that learning. If you value connection, then you probably have a need to have meaningful interactions with others. And your boundary is the structure that you create and the way that you communicate in order to make sure all that lines up. So let's talk about boundaries, needs, and values specifically for women with anxious attachment. Weak boundaries are more common in anxious attachment, I would say, and they can show up in subtle ways, especially because we tend to be very focused on keeping connections and keeping people pleased and happy, and sometimes that overrides our own needs and values because we're trying to avoid potential rejection. And there's a bit of an illusion where if things are going, quote, smoothly or, quote, well, then the experience we're having should be correct or good, even if it doesn't feel good in the body. So some ways that women with anxious attachment or people with anxious attachment override their own boundaries would be over accommodating to please others. So saying yes to things you don't want to do, agreeing to last minute plans, staying on the phone longer than you want to, taking on extra tasks at work even when it stresses you out or goes against what you actually want. This is likely stemming from a fear of disappointing others or being seen as difficult. So it makes sense. Our leaky boundaries always make sense, but they're not always for our highest good. Second, example number 2 would be not expressing when you feel hurt or upset. So instead of voicing your feelings when you're hurt, you might ignore that discomfort, you might try and brush it off, you might say, oh, I'm actually fine, for the sake of keeping the peace. For example, if you have a friend that shows up late repeatedly or cancels plans repeatedly, that might feel disappointing to you, but you might not actually address it because you're afraid that speaking up might come off as needy or might cause a conflict. Third example is allowing relationship behaviors that feel disrespectful. This is definitely indicative of an unhealthy boundary or a leaky boundary. Tolerating behavior like being left on red, unclear commitment, inconsistent attention from a partner. You might convince yourself that that's normal for a fear of losing the connection, and that fear overrides the discomfort of the behavior, leading you to then accept this treatment that doesn't actually align with your values. Another example would be sacrificing your time and energy. It's kind of similar to the first one. Example number 5 is going along with relationships at the pace of other people. Instead of expressing your own needs in terms of the pace of the relationship, you might tend to fawn into following the pace of the other person, whether that feels too slow or too fast. So for instance, you might hold back from talking about exclusivity or plans about the future because you fear that it's going to seem clingy or scare that person away, even though that's actually the pace that you feel you want to operate. And the final example I'll give you is staying silent to avoid discomfort, another leaky boundary. So if something in the relationship feels off and you have a tendency to hesitate to bring it up or convince yourself you're overreacting or maybe it's too much, this equates to not asking for clarification, feeling insecure, and you're probably trying to do it again to avoid seeming needy. So in the case of these leaky boundaries, setting a boundary is not about shutting someone down or distancing yourself. In fact, it's really necessary in order to create healthier dynamics, and those healthier dynamics are going to be a huge shift in your journey toward secure attachment, and are absolutely non-negotiable in moving along the journey from more anxiously attached to more securely attached. So I want to go back to two of those examples and break it down in terms of values and boundaries and needs. So the third example that I gave you of a leaky boundary that tends to show up in the anxious attachment style is tolerating disrespectful behavior, like inconsistent communication or being left on red, as an example. And we want to look at this in terms of values. So probably the reason that this feels bad for you is because you value respect and consistency. It is a healthy value to want to be treated with kindness and reliability and consistency, and this is going to likely be extra important to the person who has anxious attachment tendencies, because it just feels really good for our systems to have that consistency. There might also be a value of authentic communication. So you like meaningful, reciprocal relationships where you feel seen and you feel important. And because we have this value, of course, we're going to feel sensitive to anything that is inconsistent or dismissive, because it can make us feel devalued or deprioritized. So the unmet values here are respect and consistency and potentially authentic connection. The needs that also aren't being met in this situation when we have a leaky boundary is emotional security. So in order to feel grounded, it's okay to need consistency and communication and even some reassurance in your relationships, especially when you're feeling anxious about the connection. There's no rule about not needing reassurance. It just depends where that need for reassurance is coming from, right? Is it coming from a sense of urgency and lack and panic? In which case, yes, that's an opportunity to cultivate some deeper self-soothing techniques. And wanting communication and consistency and clarity and direction are all also healthy needs. On an internal level, the need here is a self-worth need. By maintaining relationships that reflect your value for respect, that's going to reinforce your need for feeling a high self-worth. So if you don't have a clear boundary around this, this is also what we're disregarding, these needs and these values. So the current lack of boundary in this situation is probably not expressing feeling disrespected or uncomfortable with the inconsistent communication. Instead, maybe tolerating it and hoping things will improve or rationalizing the behavior. And the opportunity for the healthy boundary is to honor this by just having an honest conversation with this person. You can say, consistent communication is really important to me because it helps me feel secure in our relationship, and I'd appreciate if we can make an effort to stay more connected, even if it's just a quick text if you're busy. That is the healthy, beautiful, loving request. It's not shaming the other person. It doesn't have to come from a place of anger because you actually brought it to their attention. And if that idea creates some closure in your body right now, or resistance or fear of, oh my God, they would definitely leave me if I said that, then let's circle back up to those top values and ask again, is it your value to have consistency and respect and reciprocal relationship? And if this person truly would walk away based on this request, then potentially they're not actually the person that is ever going to meet those values anyway, and then likely not someone that you want to pursue a long-term relationship with. We're going to break down one more of the 6 examples, and I want to use the example of going along with the pace of others in a relationship, even if it feels too fast or too slow. And again, the reason that we are looking at this in terms of values, needs, and then ultimately the boundary is to start to uncover why this doesn't feel good for you, to validate how this might actually not be aligned with how you feel, and then to give you a bit of a framework and direction in order to remedy that situation. So starting at the top level, which is the values. You are likely someone who values being true to yourself, or at least wants to feel like you are true to yourself, and wants your relationships to feel in alignment with your timing and your desires. So you know somewhere deep down that going at your own pace allows you to build relationships that feel solid and feel authentic. You're probably also going to have a value of mutual respect and reciprocity, so valuing relationships that feel balanced, where both partners' needs and desires are considered equally, and you might feel like what you're doing is playing your part by allowing the other person to progress or not progress at their own pace, but that is actually throwing the relationship out of balance. So in the end, it's not meeting your values by fawning to the other person's pace and will, which you might not actually know if that's even what they want, or are they just assuming maybe that's what you want, right? So this is why communication is just so important. So the need here, the reason that your pace feels good to your body, is for security and stability. So for you to be able to feel grounded as you deepen in this relationship and secure as you deepen in this relationship, you need a pace that suits your nervous system. And moving too fast or too slow can be a major trigger for anxiety or a sense of instability if it's not aligned with what really feels right for you. This behavior, this leaky boundary, is also indicating that you have a need for validation for your desires in what you want. But what's actually happening is that those preferences are just being disregarded, which is going to make you feel more unworthy in the relationship, or not heard, or not seen. And another need regarding the pacing of relationships is control over our emotional boundaries. So we want to feel that we can express what's right for us without feeling rejection or without feeling judgment, which is why a boundary is so important in this case. So the current lacking boundary or leaky boundary is going along with someone else's timing, even if it feels uncomfortable. But the potential healthy boundary here is communicating your own preferences and pacing clearly. It doesn't mean that the other person is going to be able to fully bend to your will. It just means you are taking this responsibility for the self-worth and respect and safety feeling you want in your own body by communicating it. So in that case, you might want to say, hey, I'd really like to take things slow and build a solid foundation in this relationship. Or I'm feeling ready to discuss exclusivity, and I'd love to know where you stand on that. You see how this is just expressing your truth. It's not demanding, it's not berating, it's not blamey. And again, if you notice that resistance in your body of, oh my God, they're gonna think this or that, then I want you to consider what a healthy partner actually is. And remember that you are likely seeking to be a secure partner with a secure partner, and a secure partner is going to be able to hold these requests and hear you out. So by addressing a boundary in this example, what you're actually doing is maintaining authenticity, reinforcing your own self-respect, and creating a relationship foundation that's going to feel secure and set you up for way more success long term. It's probably also going to help you feel like your desires matter when the person that you're relating to hears you and acknowledges that you have a need or desire that you want to express. I want to leave you with a strong one-liner, which is, if you're not asserting your boundaries, someone else is. Okay? If you're not asserting your boundaries, someone else is, consciously or unconsciously. Either people will come in and they will push you around to their will, or without even realizing they're doing it, life just pushes you around, and that's what happens when our boundaries are not asserted. So what do you need to do next in order to succeed in balancing your boundaries and feeling like your values and your needs and your boundaries are all aligned in this beautiful way that makes you feel empowered? It is learning your boundaries and needs, working to uncover the blocks that show up from them on a subconscious level, okay? So there's a reason that we've had leaky boundaries or rigid boundaries thus far in life. They were keeping you safe, they were a coping mechanism, they were a survival strategy, they're part of your subconscious defense system, and that's the part that we have to go in and do the healing work on and the soothing work on and the understanding and the uncovering, and we need to bring presence to these parts of ourselves within our defense system to learn a different way of operating on a nervous system level. And finally is learning how to communicate your boundaries. So those are your 3 steps, and if today's episode resonated, you definitely don't want to miss the complete Guide to Boundaries series, which is already created for you inside the Becoming Secure membership, which I mentioned every single episode. So within there is a 5-part series that takes you through my SOS framework, which will help you to uncover where unhealthy boundaries stem from. We dive into the pros and cons of boundaries, looking at why they benefit us and sometimes where they actually don't. We need to see that because that allows us to shift on the subconscious level. There's also a training with some really deep questions for how to learn your boundaries and specifically how to start communicating them. I give you a framework for how to communicate boundaries with specific sentence prompts and what to say and what it sounds like and lots of examples. And then there's also somatic practices that bring you into the body, guiding you to connect with and uncover your needs, guiding you to create deeper self-trust within the body, and learning your boundaries through the body. So understanding yourself through your boundaries and your needs and your values is such a beautiful gift to yourself, and also something that I will say may be very, very valuable as we come into holiday season, which can be a bit of a triggering and confronting time, even in the best of scenarios. So get yourself this little toolkit, plus, as you already know, there's tons of other resources in there, but even if you just go into the community, binge the boundaries topic, journal, feel it in your body, follow the guide. All you have to do, I'm telling you, all you have to do is get in there and press play, keep these headphones in or wherever you're listening, and it will happen. The work that you're looking for will happen. And cultivating healthy boundaries really is the difference, as I said in the beginning, of acting from fear or compromising your values or holding, oh my gosh, anger and resentment in the body, which we want to release. And on the other side, we get your needs met in a healthy way. You're able to communicate in a way that feels so graceful and loving, like total graceful queen energy. You stay in alignment, you feel empowered, you feel like your relationships are being built on a solid foundation of trust and openness and care. And through that, you are deeply connected to yourself, which is, of course, what I want from you. So I've linked Becoming Secure membership in the description below, and I trust I will see you soon. Let's do the damn thing. Today is the day. I'll be there for you, and I'll talk to you soon.